Welcome to Mindboost Moments, a podcast for those who want to hear from like-minded people and how they're making a dent in the world. So join me on my continued journey of learning and discovery. Today I'm joined by Lyndsey Oliver, Head of Equity, Diversity and Inclusion for BaxterStory. We had a great chat about a wiggly line career and how freedom and flexibility helps us stay creative. Lyndsey has a knack of opening your mind and getting you to think differently, but she does it in such a humble way. She's a passionate advocate of everyone bringing their real selves to work every day and creating an environment where people enjoy themselves. This is Mindboost Moments.
It was really weird when I saw the advert, right? When I saw the advert for the BaxterStory job, first of all, I was like, who's BaxterStory? Because I hadn't heard of them before. But I knew as soon as I saw the job, I was going to get it. I mean, so random, but obviously right. There was always a sense of knowing. And it wasn't from an egotistical point of view. I just had a sense that this was the one.
Yeah.
And it's true. It's kind of, it's being allowed. I mean, fuel your individuality is part of our brand. And actually, that is absolutely true in terms of what the business is built upon. And sometimes there's kind of a tagline for a company that isn't that congruent when you actually get into the business, but it totally is congruent from a BaxterStory point of view. And I'd agree in terms of kind of the building blocks. I got an amazing kind of introduction into corporate, but also building my skills and capabilities, even though it was in IT. Diageo was a brilliant company and is a brilliant company to work for. And I was really fortunate to have that because it gave me a lot of, I didn't know at the time, but actually when you then look outside and especially working with different companies when I have my business, I started to realize in particular, I was like, wow, actually that was brilliant.
Yeah. And I think that the thing that I miss actually being in a small business is the amount of people, the amount of different ideas that you get and the amazing playground that you've got in front of you to try things if you've got the freedom and flexibility to do that.
Yeah.
And so, and that's what it sounds so simple really, doesn't it? So operating a corporate business where you've got lots of opportunities, opportunity with finance or commercials as well to make, to allow you to do stuff like that, but the freedom to operate in your individual skill set and let you stretch. I mean, that doesn't sound like rocket science, right? Does it?
No.
But it's amazing.
There's always some boundaries. There's always some limits around that. However, when you really take individuality and put it into the heart of the business, it is around, well, how, if you really tap into people's core values, beliefs, experiences, capabilities, then they will thrive. They will thrive. But how many times do you see companies or relationships or whatever it would be around trying to constrain somebody, and trying to make them smaller rather than actually giving them the platform to really thrive?
So on that, then I ask you a question to say, well, what makes you fizz with excitement each day, and what what have you thought about?
It's a bit like an interview, wasn't it? I'm like, oh dear, I'm applying for a new job again.
You've got it.
I mean, so it just sounds a bit like naff when I say it, but it really is about making a difference and really improving people's sense of belonging and well-being and inclusion at work in terms of my role, but just in general. But think about my kids. I want them to be the very best version of themselves and to be really happy. I mean, what parent doesn't want that?
Yeah.
And so when I see them doing things that just make me proud to be their mum, it's the same in work. When you see someone performing really well or expressing themselves, or I don't know what it is, but it's like seeing other people and their real brilliant shine, that really gives me energy.
And I think so you've got a way of doing that as well, because I have to say every conversation we have, I step away and I have to question myself and I think differently as a result of that.
Oh, good. Thinking differently is good.
Exactly. So I come away and I think that's amazing. That's really good. Like, I'm challenging my own biases, and you make me do that actually by the subtle stuff you do. So you live and breathe what you're saying, and I think that's, you've been given an opportunity in BaxterStory to say this is what you really believe in and how you want to open people's minds and get them to think differently. It's an environment that enables that as well.
Yeah, totally. And I think, I mean, I hope I do get people to think differently and to question themselves, because I think one of the things around kind of this area is around that self-reflection, that self-awareness, and just kind of like questioning some of the things that we've believed to be true for years and years and years, and maybe for our entire lifetime. And just being able to kind of adopt a different perspective and just to challenge your own thinking is key to unpacking biases. And there's a bad rap about unconscious bias training and all of that stuff, but it really just is around how do we see the full human in front of us, and how do we not make assumptions about that person and just get curious about that person's situation or circumstance. And I think we make it a lot more complicated than it needs to be at times. And maybe maybe it's me, but I think it's a lot more simple than it can be.
Well, I mean, I tend to agree with that. But I think that I suppose the challenge is we don't always know the full story behind someone's, sort of mask or what they're saying or what they're doing. And, it's almost that opportunity to sort of pause and think and go, oh, okay. But, I've had a couple of conversations recently that have changed my mindset to go, I want to make sure that I listen more, that I understand more, and that every conversation I step away from ends up in a smile, rather than everything is because you hear so often in corporate, we're going in for a fight, we've got to get this battle done. And you think, well, what terrible language, isn't it about just understanding people and getting the best out of people?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a fight. And I think it's around how do you choose your battles. And I mean, I can get on my soapbox, of course, when it comes to Edie and I. And I guess it's just choosing where to put that energy and how to place that energy in a way that's not going to turn people away and will really attract people into that. Some of it is a bit woo-woo, really. I know woo-woo is not really
in what way? Why do you say that?
Because I think when we're really looking at exclusion, inclusion, conscious bias, unconscious bias, and things like that, part of it is beyond kind of like conscious knowledge. So even if you go back to my example of, I saw the BaxterStory job advert and I knew that I'd get that job, I had no proof at all. It was just kind of like
a gut feeling.
It's just a sense, right? It's a gut feeling. And there's so many examples in life where we move away from gut feeling and kind of like override with logic. So in that moment, I could have gone, well, don't be silly. You don't know. You haven't even got an interview yet. Like, why did you think that you're going to get the job?
No, I've just got a feeling.
But you've just got a feeling. And we've been taught, a lot of us, to override that gut feeling, override that sense of knowing, because it needs to cognitively make sense. And even if you take how we educate our kids, right, it's based on cognitive knowledge versus using our intuition, using our sense of knowing. And I think part of that whole self-awareness piece and the whole part of that getting curious piece is that we don't often know. We don't often know someone's story or someone's history in front of us, yet we see a behavior and you just kind of try and make sense of that behavior. And I guess it's moving to a place of, well, how do you adopt that stance of not knowing? How do you adopt that stance of curiosity?
Yeah.
And how do you go beyond what you see as the obvious behavior in front of you, for example, and get curious? And I think part of it is around, it's not really playful, I don't mean it in that way, but kind of thinking, well, how do I navigate this? And not just thinking it's right, it's directly from A to B, because A to B isn't necessarily the obvious direction. It might be kind of like this squiggly way of getting to the answer. And so we kind of trust it. A lot of it is based on trust. A lot of it is based on seeing the good that's in people, even if what you're experiencing isn't necessarily,
it doesn't feel good at the time. Yeah. And I think that's something about, having more of a curious mind rather than this is the the thing I'm seeing in front of me, and this is what I think the reaction needs to be. It's almost, stepping back, pausing, asking, caring, I suppose is the other thing, genuinely caring about understanding or getting the best from that person. And again, I really, so I keep talking about this, why that's what makes us human. So gut reaction is one that makes us human. And, all the talk about AI, I'm really struggling to go, I cannot see AI going, I've got a gut feeling, because that's logical, but that's our superhuman power.
Yeah. So if you take AI, for example, if we knew how to fix exclusion, how to fix marginalization, how to fix oppression, how to fix discrimination so that it didn't exist, we would have done that.
Yeah.
The answer would be there, the solution would be there, and we basically pick it off the shelf and go, right, let's just apply that and we're done. But we don't have all the answers. We have some of the answers. We've definitely made, well, depends on where you are, right? I say that we've made progress, but it's progress, lack of progress, progress, lack of progress. So if we don't have all the answers and we don't have all the solutions, there has to be kind of this acceptance that the answers are there. We don't necessarily know all of them right now. And so kind of what's the next best answer right now when we don't have all of the tools and all of the knowledge to fix all of this? Ideally, I'd love to fix all of it. I'd love to say that there's no barriers, no blockages for anyone. And if you're the right person for the job, you get the job. That's not true, because we know it's not true. So I think where you are in a position where there isn't a straightforward solution that can be applied, there's not, because no business has got it right, no country has got it right, no political system has got it right.
I'm not sure we're
right, and
I'm not sure.
I like to think that we will definitely be in a much better position than we are. But I think there is an element of, there's always going to be differences, right? But it's about there's a podcast that I listen to, and don't judge me on this, but it's The Rest is Politics, which I think is very good, by the way. It's really informed me about politics in a lot of ways. But the two presenters speak about how do you disagree agreeably, which is around how do you listen to someone else's perspective. So someone will always have a different view, a different perspective, a different set of beliefs. But how do you, rather than fight who's right and who's wrong because you disagree or don't believe in that thing,
try and understand
what is the way forward? How do we make a way forward? Because it's not about turning everyone into robots and having the same set of thoughts, beliefs, because all of those differences are what makes us brilliantly human and wonderfully different. It's around how do you embrace that but still make a path forwards and help all people to feel included in that, rather than actually, I disagree with you, you're out there, versus being able to disagree with you agreeably in here as well. And I could, like, before that podcast, I would call it having the messy conversations. You've got to have the messy conversations.
Definitely.
You've got to be able to get in there and find common ground. How do you find common ground with someone who is politically different from you, who has totally different beliefs from a religious point of view? Where is the common ground and how do we find that? But what we see a lot and what gets reported on a lot is, not having that common ground.
No, I don't think mainstream media helps with that mindset, actually. But I'm just thinking, so humans are complex. Humans, quite rightly, are very different in their beliefs and their thought processes. But I think the commonality that I always see, it is just sort of stopping and listening and trying to understand. But is there would you give a single piece of advice to go, if you're not doing that, this is something, you could do slightly different to change that pathway?
Talk about in the business as well. And when you and I have had loads of conversations about this, I think one step forward that anyone can do to listen to a different set of voices than you usually would listen to, just to kind of get a broadening of your knowledge and experience of people that live differently and have a different life experience to you. So it could be listening to different podcasts, reading a book by an author from a marginalized group, listening to different music, getting you news from different news outlets, seeing how the same news story is repeated in a very different way and articulated in a very different way depending on the media outlet you go to. And you have to say, well, it's one story, but like 17 different versions of it, all with a completely different spin. So what is true? Like, it's kind of like, how do you question your source of truth? Just so that you can challenge yourself. So I think widening your vision and kind of just trying to get a different view of the world and a different view of people that you don't necessarily surround yourself is a good thing, because it's really well, I find it interesting. And not everyone finds it interesting, but I find it really interesting. I love hearing people's stories, understanding kind of like their lived experience, their heritage, kind of their interests, their views, their perspectives. I'm like, that is just richness. And
and I think that's, but maybe that's another step in the right direction as well, just to be comfortable to understand that, rather than sit in your mind that I've always done this, so therefore I always want to do the same thing, because, you know, that enrichment of different ideas and cultures and backgrounds and beliefs, it is really rewarding, actually, to a lot of people. But there are a group of people that would say, oh, that scares the hell out of me, you know, understanding different. I'm all right where I am. And, you know, it's just sort of gently opening the door to people to, you know, to get them to think slightly different or to understand different ideas and beliefs.
And I think it's quite tricky in my role, because I remember when I first joined the business, they're like, oh, she's coming, can't say this, can't say that. And I guess, you know, I don't want to be the fun police in my job. It's not about that, but it really is around understanding how to get the best out of every single person within the business, and how it's okay to be the real and true version of you. You don't have to twist and contort yourself to fit in. And some of the stuff that I talk about is how do people add to our culture rather than fit with our culture. You know, there's a journey that we're going on around that. And when I think about unleashed potential, you know, everywhere you look, you want growth, whether it's growth within this business, growth within this country. Like, everyone seems to be talking about growth in terms of like the way forward. But actually, if you restrict yourself, I just think there's a parallel between, if we restrict ourselves and we minimize ourselves, then there is a direct cause and effect piece of how can we really grow? How can we have that effect? If our inner world is constricted, our outer world is constricted as well. Now, if your inner world is not restricted, you feel that you can grow, you feel that you can expand, and you feel that you can make a difference, then that will inevitably have an impact and a consequence in terms of how you can grow, I don't know, your business or whatever it would be. So I see a direct correlation between kind of inner and outer, which is why it's really important to make sure that people are free to be.
If you think about that as purely as a business, you've got the risk-averse business that will only ever do what they've always done. They're producing widgets in a way, and that's it. That's all they ever want to do. And you've got a business then that says, I want to understand more. I want to be, you know, a little bit more vibrant, creative, understand the different things. The downside to both is you're only ever going to make what you've always made, and you're probably going to see those profits, you know, flatline, or that growth flatline. As opposed to the other, it's going to be quite messy. It's going to be difficult to understand, but then you'll see it take off because it's more enriching as a business as well. And whether that's a business or whether that's an individual person and their mind, it's probably something similar, because if you've never experienced other cultures and understanding people, it takes quite a lot to go, I really want to understand. Tell me more. Tell me more. It can be quite mentally draining. But once you've got to that, you know, got over that point, it's then what an enriching conversation you have with everyone else.
But transitions are always messy, right?
Yeah.
Life transitions are messy, like going, you know, moving to a new school as a kid, going through puberty, going through perimenopause. You know, transitions are messy, and some transitions are forced on you, for sure, right? So COVID and the pandemic was forced on us, and that
puberty, menopause,
all perimenopause.
Of it.
I don't choose that. But and so there is this. A lot of the time, it's wanting to kind of move back to the safety and security of how it was. versus actually once you're through this, what is kind of like the liberation and freedom and expanse on the other side. But there is always that messy part in the middle, and it's how do you stick with that messy part in the middle, and it expects that, you know, there's a forwards backwards bit as you kind of go through that. And that, you know, that's hard because we want it to be clean and easy. We want it to be a straight line, do this and this is what you get.
Do you think though we want that, or do you think that we've been conditioned to go that's the best route?
I think most people would take easy over hard.
Maybe it's just me then.
No. Well, I think there is a conditioning, isn't there, around not showing the messy versions of ourselves, not showing the bits that are hard, and you know, appearing in a polished and professional way at all times, versus just going, actually, I forgot someone's name yesterday, because, you know, that's very menopause for you, and admitting that, because actually when you share some of that, people connect actually.
Well, it makes you look authentic and approachable and real, you know, rather than this, you know, glossy finish that people go.
I'm not sure I've ever had a glossy finish.
I don't believe
you
it.
You still get me with wet. So yeah, glossy finish when this is actually going out to the masses, and no polish here, I'm afraid.
So I also asked you another question. Well, what do you think your superpower is?
Oh, I don't know. I'm sorry, Kaylee. But
oh, come on.
So superpower. I mean, that I was really thinking, God, it is an interview, because, you know, what's your strength and what's your weakness? And there is that bit where superpower.
Have you actually crossed your arms now?
Yeah, I have. Yeah. There you go. They're uncrossed. So with every superpower, there's kryptonite, right? There's kind of like
yeah.
So I used to think, being a generalist, and I would call myself a generalist. I've got knowledge of. I've got knowledge of ED&I, and I've got knowledge of X, Y, and Z and previous experience of blah, 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 whatever it is. But I would call myself a generalist. And I used to think that was really bad, because IT, often you have to have a specialism. And that whole jack of all trades, master of none. I always used to be pretty good at most things, which is good, right? Can't complain about that. If you take academically, pretty good at most things, but I was never like the best at this or the best at that. And so it's hard to come up with a superpower. But I think one of the things that I do well, and I've realized as I've got older that it is a skill, is that I can do the strategic big picture piece, but I can also do the detail. And I think that's part of how do you paint a picture, but how do you, from an IT point of view, make sure that you've got a project plan and a risks document and an issues log and an actions log. So I think my ability to think macro and micro is a skill. I wouldn't call it a superpower. I genuinely don't know if I've got a superpower, Caleb, if I'm really honest. Maybe someone might tell me otherwise, but I'm not sure.
As I said, I always think, I come away from you thinking differently. And I think sometimes a superpower, you don't always know yourself. And I think you do that really well, actually. I mean, if you were to say to me, what do you think my superpower is? I would say, wow, you've got this ability to make me think differently and challenge myself all the time. And you go, oh, do I? And you absolutely do. And that, you know, so I would say something about that. And maybe your layering of superpower, it says I can do that with all ranges of different people and backgrounds, because that's my, you know, my superpower.
Thank you. I mean, I don't know what to say. I find it really tricky. I mean, it's one of those things I can talk endlessly about ED&I and stuff like that, but as soon as I start talking about myself, that's something else. But yeah, I mean, I don't know is the genuine answer as to what my superpower is. I've got lots of strengths. I've also got lots of weaknesses, like all of us. Is there one that I can hang my hat on? Not really. And I think even actually that whole generalism also comes out in sports, right? So I, as you know, because I chat to you a lot, I am sporty, I am active, I do lots of things, and done quite a few sports in my life, and I'm all right at them, but there's not like, I'm not like GB level at anything. Not that I want to be GB level, but I think that whole piece of I can apply myself to lots of different situations and circumstances, and whatever that generalist skill set is comes to play. And I've started to embrace that more as I've got older, because I realised that it's useful and it's connecting, and it allows me to have, hi doggo, really good conversations with people. And I do like having really good conversations with people, but I'm a combination of an introvert and an extrovert, right? I like really good conversations, but I also like walking in the countryside and peace and solitude as well. So that whole yin and yang piece is part of who I am as well. Hence why I'm just garbling in terms of answering the question, because I just don't know.
I think there's something about, a humility of character there, because I think if you ask lots of other people around you, they would go, I know exactly what it is. And actually I get the same challenges when I can talk about other people, but as soon as someone says, tell us about you then, it's like, I know you're all right. Let's focus on you.
Yeah. So answers on a postcard, people.
I like it.
Identify Lyndsey Oliver's superpower. I'll be absolutely open to.
Well, you literally have just proved my point then, because most people go, oh yeah, I've been thinking about this and this is what it is. You have done that so different as well. I wouldn't expect anything less.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's see if we get any postcards, Caleb, and I'll share it with you as a kind of version 2 of the podcast.
I love it. It's been amazing chatting to you. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thanks for inviting me along, and really good to chat with you as well, Caleb.
If people want to find out more about you, what's the best way to do that or connect with you?
Probably LinkedIn is the best to connect with me on. Okay. Yeah, I would say LinkedIn. My name, Lyndsey Oliver.
Yeah.
Quite easy. Google Lyndsey Oliver BaxterStory, and you should find me. But yeah, more than happy to connect with other people.
Lovely. Thank you so much.
No problem. Take care. Have a good rest of your day, Caleb.
And you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This has been Mindboost Moments. If you enjoyed this conversation and want to hear more, subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. And if you want to learn how Mindboost can really add feeling and emotion to learning experiences within your business, check out our website at mindboostlearning.com.